Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I am your host, Nick Schutt, and just again want to thank everybody who's out there listening today, or whenever you're listening to this. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and just want to remind you that you guys are, part of what makes this journey for me so fun and so successful. So really, thank you so much. Happy to have my friends Neil Cohen and Arti Raman with me today. How are you both doing?
Great. Thank you for having us. It's exciting to be part of your podcast and conversation. We appreciate the opportunity to share our message.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It was
that's what she said.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
really, guys, obviously was happy to meet you, Neil, at Legal Week this year. The first year was at the Javits Center, which was a bit of a change. What were your thoughts about the conference overall?
Well, I had not been to the previous facility, although that's all people kept saying is like got out of that cramped like a Hilton meeting space. Lovely
Mhm.
hotel, but probably not ideal. Uh, I think what really struck me was the number of companies there, in the legal tech realm. There were almost 6,000 attendees. There was a full hall full of people, all with these kind of fairly niche offerings for all the different areas of, from e-discovery to regulation compliance, to lawyer assistants. To me, it opened up a whole new world because I had never been to a conference like that. And for Portal 26, that was in the parlance of our business, a new ICP, ideal customer profile,
Mhm.
of who in the legal profession, whether you're a general counsel at a corporation or a law firm, how might you use our tool? And I think the other pleasant surprise was uh, how people really did need us, that they didn't know that they could do what we do.
Mhm.
And so impressed at the amount and quality of legal tech that was there that helps
Mhm.
law firms be better, and optimistic about our opportunity in the space.
Awesome. Yeah, no, really appreciate it. And for folks out there that haven't had the opportunity to get to know you, Neil, or you, Artie, or have heard of Portal 26. And Artie, I'd love it if you would start. Just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your story, and kind
Yeah.
of how you got here and what led you to found this company.
Man, thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a lovely way to start. So, Arti Raman, CEO, founder, I have a very deep cybersecurity background. So, before here, I was at Symantec. That should say it all. Symantec's one of those companies that trains you. You know how certain places you kind of have to have all the skills before you go into the place, but it's one of the few companies, and it doesn't exist now, but
Mhm.
where they trained you. So I got a lot of hardcore training on, endpoint security, data protection, network security, things like that. And I rose up to that company to when I left, I was doing product management, product strategy, and also competitive intelligence. And that competitive intelligence group supported the M&A team. And so what was interesting was to have like a real insight into all the white space in the security industry, because you just do a lot of research when you study competition and various offerings and how they overlap and what the landscape looks like and things like that. And so it was there that I had the idea of to go start a company that did some hardcore data security. And when we started this company in 2019, it was a broader data security play. And that was very successful as well. But as soon as AI hit the markets at the end of 2022, it occurred to both our team as well as our community of CISOs and CIOs that the need for cybersecurity as it pertains to AI is going to be massive.
Mhm.
And so we were literally on the ground floor as enterprises started this adoption journey, some being dragged into it and some deliberately. We were right there. So 2023, back in 2023, when many of our competitors did not exist as companies, we had this, AI security, AI governance platform that we grew and built with all of these companies. So the journey to AI security, AI governance, AI adoption for us has literally been from the start of enterprise AI. So it's really exciting. It's the first time in my career I've been literally on the ground floor. As my customers have grown, so have we. So long way to introduce myself, but it's a really exciting way to start because you're just on the bleeding edge the whole time.
Hmm.
I'd like to add that I think Arti is being a little modest here. It's not often you get to work in the technology industry and create a category. And, Portal 26 was the first company of its kind in the space. And for your gentle listeners and viewers, we have 100% visibility of everything that goes on around generative AI and agentic usage. So this is what people are actually doing, not the model building, but like the visibility into what people are doing. And then that's all signal for innovation and risk and that type of thing. And nobody had even thought of that before. Arti and her two co-founders kind of came up with the concept. So more credit is due to her than she'd like to take.
Oh, thank you. Well, so while we're not giving the ball back to Nick, let me complete that description here. So, tactically and practically, what we do is we really easily, like 10 minutes to deploy, we really easily instrument an organization so we can see all the AI. Whether it's people calling public GPTs, whether it's people spinning up models on the hyperscalers, whether it's like agents you're downloading on your own, laptops and things like that. We see all of it. And because we see all of it and we can inspect all of it, we've been doing this for years now, we can organize it for you. We can tell you people are doing bad things. We can stop bad things from happening. We can tell you where the value is, where the use cases are, what you should build, what you should buy, whether you're licensed, whether you're not licensed, like the enormous amounts of visibility and information you can get is something that is desperately needed. Because look at
Hmm.
all the people trying to make decisions on AI, right? They're doing it literally blindfolded at the moment. So there's a lot of power in the tech and there's a lot of power in the data. And we do both the enforcement as well as the analytics.
Hmm.
And maybe that's a more complete way to introduce us. So think about what I said and Neil said and I said again, and that's your answer.
Yeah, no, awesome. Really, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And I think that, one of the things that I hear a lot from leaders, and then this is also something that's very, very important as you look at and think about AI usage within companies, right? Is that, and I think a lot of people don't realize that everything that goes into these public LLMs, right, is all ingested by the LLM. And then if you're not paying for it at a certain level, they take all that and retrain their models on all of that, those inputs and that data, right? And all of a sudden, if you're uploading proprietary company information into some of these places, now all of a sudden your competitors may be able to pull out your proprietary company information. And like there's a huge cybersecurity risk as it relates to AI in general. And so, Artie, what are you seeing now as far as shadow AI usage within organizations? Like, how many organizations that you guys are deployed at, how many people are using tools that either, are unlicensed or not being paid for, or where you're the product, as opposed to, more of the like local on-site AI tools that are much more secure.
So I would say on average, the number of sanctioned tools, and this is today, the number of sanctioned tools in an organization are usually somewhere in the range of 5 to 30. They're like either doing all their work on Copilot and three, four other things, or, if you're a large company, there's department specific tools and things like that. Relative to that, the amount of shadow AI we find, so tools that people are using that aren't in that set, so it's not monitored, there's no policy for it. You have no idea, you have no rules, you have no guardrails, etc. So we would see upwards from between 280 to about 600 tools. So the span of what's happening in the shadows versus what is being sanctioned is massive. And here's the kicker. The worst part of it is that your legacy network security tools that by now have caught up to the understanding that there's something called AI and we must treat that on the network differently. At least we must give you an opportunity to block it. Right. So this would be your secure web gateways, your Zscalers, Netscopes, Palo Alto, all of those guys, right? Cisco. So the problem is that their categories themselves are horribly incomplete. Like we want to say like 15 to 40% coverage. So imagine you have 200 new AI tools hitting your network every week. Your network controls are maybe, recognizing, well, the new ones are not seeing it all, 15, 20, 30% of those. Now you've got this big hole in your network, right? Where you don't even know what's in and out. So the shadow AI problem is very bad. And then in the last few weeks, in the spirit of giving you really long answers to your short questions, in the last few weeks, ever since, right, Anthropic and OpenClaw and all of this stuff is happening that's been hitting the news, that risk has gone up significantly. So not only now are people using AI in the form of agents, those things are hooked up to everything else, resources, things on your app, company information. So it's not you necessarily uploading documents into chat gpt. It's this thing that you authorize, this agent that's doing it for you. You wouldn't even know. So it's become really bad in the last few weeks. It wasn't already pretty bad before.
And I would say there's a yin and yang to Artie's answer because the, a lot of organizations that we talk to, they don't want to block all this AI coming in because they want, like, the line is 1,000 flowers to bloom. Like, let's innovate and let's see what's going on. But if you don't have visibility into that and you don't understand what's on the network, it's a double-edged sword, shadow AI. It can show innovation and it can show where people are actually doing what we call evidence-based work because this is what they opted into.
Mhm.
Or it could show like things that shouldn't be on your network. And if your listeners think about how they personally work, think about when the company forces a tool down on you. It's like everybody's going to use XYZ. It could be something, and I hate to pick on Cisco, but WebEx, right?
Mhm.
And nobody liked WebEx. So that's, people started putting Zoom on their credit card, right? That shadow IT. Shadow AI is the same way. It's like I'm not going to use that tool. That wasn't built for my department. If that wasn't built for my skill set, I'm just going to buy with my credit card something that's going to help me be better, and I'm going to use that. Well, that's great if you have guardrails around it in the organization. But if you can't see that and you can't understand that, that can open up risk for the organization.
100%. And guys, what are some of the most surprising or like concerning behaviors you're seeing with employees around how they're utilizing AI? And have you seen folks that are have you seen instances where people are uploading sensitive company data to public tools?
All over the place, unfortunately. So we see people doing things inadvertently for the most part. And so it used to be where someone's really sincerely, firstly, wanting to adopt as, as one should, because if you don't learn and embrace new technology, that sort of impacts your own career. So it's be a lot of people being proactive about engaging with AI, but not realizing that their work involves something, it doesn't have to be credit card numbers for it to be sensitive, right? So you've got people in financial services whose job, let's say, they work in the fraud detection department. Pretty much anything they put into an LLM is usually sensitive and they don't realize that. People working in human resources, so people going to public GPTs to upload information, it remains a massive problem. It has become only worse since personal AI agents have basically exploded on the scene. Now you can basically take an entire business workflow that you do and hook it up, to agentic capabilities. So this thing now has access to your email, your files, all of your entitlements on the network, and you've given it the keys. And so then it's less about, did you know the policy? Did you not know the policy? It's just that, not everybody is an engineering savvy individual. So you're likely to make big, big mistakes. So
Mhm.
we're seeing all of that. We're also seeing, believe it or not, behaviors that would get you arrested. So we're seeing where on the other end of it, is a nation state that's malicious, that's got data collection mechanisms that are set up through AI sites. And the way AI goes across our network is a little bit different than how typical traffic goes across our network, because the information that we're sending to an AI is wrapped inside these prompts now, right? And that looks different on the network. So you really have to have the tech to extract those prompts to understand if it's sensitive or not, as opposed to, your usual old-fashioned regular expression type things that scan your network traffic. So we have actually seen where data was being sent across in using AI, where the FBI had to be called and things like that.
Mhm.
We see HR violations all the time, people using AI to produce content that they shouldn't, or create content that they shouldn't, that either violates copyrights or HR policies. So it's all over the place. But and then a final point I'll add is there definitely are the haves and the have-nots in terms of information. So
Mhm.
we might be among the smaller proportion of people who understand the risks of AI. Because you live it, you breathe it, you talk about it, you're engaged with it. But then think about like my parents' generation, or people in between, or people in locations that don't have access to technology. For them, it looks no different than what they did before, but it's got all this power of consuming and ingesting that information.
Yeah,
So
well,
all in all, I think it's red alert, basically.
100%. I find it fascinating when I step outside of our little AI bubble, right? Folks like
Yeah,
us who, work in it, or, talk about it constantly, or, are in the technology space. But when you get outside of that, right? Like I have friends that are auto mechanics, right? They have
yeah,
no idea what this is, right? We have friends that are,
yeah,
work in warehouses that are not in these spaces or in these bubbles and thinking about things, but any of the depth that we are and we do, and they don't really understand or see what's in the process of happening right now. It's fascinating to see people step outside of it, and when you step outside of it and see what is actually going on and what's actually happening, and I'm not surprised that there are people that are doing illegal things, or trying to, or breaking
yeah,
breaking policies, or like, there's a lot of different ways. And then, but also, like, all of the information going out and back, and, like, it depends on what model you're using as well, where that data is stored, right? If you're
yeah,
using like like a Grok or something, or versus an open AI versus an Anthropic. They're all these tools are very, very different. They provide different kinds of answers as well.
yeah,
And that's before you start talking about, AI overseas. And then to your point, Artie, about like the data collection, something that I think about a lot is, like Google and Meta have made hundreds of billions of dollars selling search information, right? And what you're searching for, but the amount of the kind of information that you're giving in a search, where you're essentially yelling at a browser to bring you stuff, right? Food near me, right? It's like three words, right? But when you have a back and forth exchange that lasts, 10, 15, 20, 30, iterations back and forth, think about the amount of data that, or I should
Yeah,
say, the different kind of data that's gathered and
yeah,
collected, the
yeah,
granularity of that data, and what that is going to enable these companies to be able to do for you. It's
yeah,
just very, very, very different, and the risks are different. And I think that most people don't actually understand what's going on as it relates to that.
yeah.
no,
Well,
I go
yeah.
ahead, go
Oh, well,
ahead, Neil.
I was gonna just say, like, I'm a marketer, right?
Hmm.
But I often say to people that myself and our ilk are the cause of all the ills in the world, because of all the stuff that you're just talking about, which is
Hmm.
this ability to hyper target and understand almost everything about you at the end game to sell you something. It might be more software, but it could be soda pop, and it could be a political idea. And so, and I don't think, to your point, Nick, that people do understand even how much more their privacy they're giving up. I taught at SF State for many years as an adjunct, and it ended at the pandemic, like most did for adjuncts. But I used to ask my class at the beginning of every class, how many people in this room think you have privacy? And this was again before all of this, right?
Hmm.
And not a single student would raise their hand.
Yeah.
They all knew that everything they did was up for grabs, but they were okay with it because they knew about it. But I don't think everybody else is so savvy. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, think about, we used to say you are the product. I mean,
yes.
that has never been more true. And the scary thing is, I don't even think the producers of the models and the frontier technology are actually aware of all of the implications of where we're going. It's almost like it's a bit of a runaway train. It's going in that direction. We're fighting. We're, trying to win the race and we're not quite sure where the race ends, and I feel that's the reality. So there's a lot of the intellectuals are trying to figure out what does the world look like, if AI does all the work, how will humans ever earn anything, and if there's only production and no consumption, what happens? But I think all of those are valid questions, and it's a little bit further than your question that you asked, Nick, but
Oh, let's talk
100% in
about it.
agreement.
No, let's talk about it. I'm down to get philosophical, Artie. You know?
It's your show, you guide it.
No, I mean, I think that there are a lot of structures in our society that are antiquated, right? There's a lot of them. And I think that we're watching a massive amount of change, right, happening right
Yeah.
now. And I think that one of the things that I like about your product, and I had the opportunity to Neil showed me at Legal Week everything and how it works is that there's a
Mhm.
difference between, you know, AI governance in theory and in practice, right? And you're able to give granularity into what's going on in the network and what's going on inside of a company so that they have the information to properly govern a lot of these tools. And I think I bring that up specifically because, I think that to your point, it is a runaway train, right? We're committed, right? And something that I always like to remind people of is that the AI you're using today is the floor, right? This is the worst it's going to be for the rest of your life. And I'm sure you guys have seen all the news with the new model that Anthropic just released, Mythos, right?
Mhm.
Which is finding, I mean, essentially can just find security vulnerabilities all over the place, right? And if you're not in, and I think that there's a lot, I think there's some tech companies, some large tech companies that I won't name that are essentially paying to Anthropic not to release this product so that they have an opportunity to try to patch some of these things because of the number of security vulnerabilities that they're finding within within these massive programs that they have. And I think that governance is so important as you go about setting all of these things up, which is one of the reasons I'm really excited. One of the reasons I started this is because you can't like go in and fix it later if in the same way you could. I think it's really dangerous to take the Zuckerberg approach of break stuff now, we'll figure it out later. And I think that, it's just again really dangerous. So
Well, yeah, well, Nick, at the enterprise level, it gets very expensive, and we know with a lot of our customers, but you've heard it out there. There's been MIT research, PwC research, Bain research, like all the big, that these, people are going into it head first and then finding out that they're not getting the ROI. They've spent a lot of money. It took them 3 or 4 months to figure out what to test, and then 6 months later, after they tested it, it didn't do what it was supposed to do because and the big challenge there is people are doing kind of like this thumb in the air approach, this consultant approach or this management approach of saying, here's what we think our people should be doing and how they should be doing it. And instead of an evidence-based approach of like, why don't we turn on the lights and see what's going on in the organization and see what people are actually doing because it is out there with shadow AI or with the tools they bring in, whether it's Copilot or Anthropic or whatever it might be, and then say like, hey, look, we can see 40 people doing this thing over and over and over again. That's probably an agent. Or, hey, people are gravitating towards this one tool, but it's unlicensed and it's risky. Should we buy that tool since our customer service department seems to really like that idea and there's 80 people using it, but there's no governance around it. So maybe we should get a license for that and put our arms around it. And so this is and so when we bring this approach to our customers, when we bring this kind of turn the lights on, this MRI where they can see the use cases, understand the risk, they tend to have an 80 to 85 to 90% success rate with their proof of concepts and go into production so much sooner. So we have big Fortune 100 companies, big companies that you have heard of, who have cut that timeline by 80% from an idea to a production.
Hmm.
And they're moving ahead faster, and they're the ones who are being more competitive. And these other approaches are just not working. And that's why we see, more and more people kind of adopting the kind of approach that we're recommending in the marketplace.
Anything to add to that, Artie?
Well, yeah, so you brought up a couple of points. So one was that, the governance model needs to change because, you bolting on governance afterwards is difficult. And I think in a conceptual way to think about it is when you have an employee in your organization, you basically can evaluate their work and then you can evaluate their behaviors, right? And you can have two different uh, dimensions to that, right? Hey, you really need to do a good job. And by the way, if you break the law or spill our secrets or do something bad, right, then there's consequences. You're gonna get fired and you're gonna have other problems, right? If you have an agent doing this, you just lost a whole dimension of control, right? You're not firing that agent, you're not coaching that agent, you're not talking to them or anything like that, right? So if you don't have the controls and the governance built in to how the work gets done in the first place, you will not have any governance. And the problem is that the people that are building the models and building apps are solely focused on automating the work or, AIizing the work, however you want to say it, right? Oh, I'm going to do customer support using AI, or oh, I'm going to do, vulnerability detection using AI. But that other side of it, right? What to not do is just, it's not them. It's another set of companies like us and someone else, right? And so if these two don't move at the same pace, you're in trouble.
Hmm.
And so I think now I don't have an answer to that, but I think that's really what you're seeing. So wherever we can get in, whenever we can get in, and we are constantly saying instrumentation is your friend. You cannot have human based governance or the speed of humans, which we did when you tell people what the HR policies, etc. You just can't have it for AI. You have to have instrumentation technology that moves as fast as AI moves, and then everything that Neil said, right, from that point on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that one of the very one some of the ways that companies are successfully implementing these is the bottom up approach, right? The
Yeah.
grassroots approach of giving people the opportunity to play with these tools as a function of doing their job. Because yeah, everybody's talking about job losses all the time, things like, but you're
Yeah.
not going to lose your job probably anytime soon as it relates to AI. AI is not going to replace a lot of people yet, but who you will lose your job to is somebody that's using AI as a function of doing their job because that makes them better at their job. They're able to do more faster,
Yeah.
right? And then and so what are, some examples you guys have seen where of like grassroots AI use within organizations that is translated to real business value because
Mhm.
leaders are empowering their people to utilize these tools in whatever ways they see fit for their position.
Yeah. So one of the very cool modules we built, and I'm starting with the module because it's relevant, not just a product pitch. So backing up a little bit, everything we built, because we started back in, 2023, everything we built, we just built by popular demand. Customers
Hmm.
are, oh, I need your tool to do this.
Right.
So a couple of quarters ago, people were like, you know what? We need to make investments. We want to build agentic workflows. We want to do these things, right? And it occurred to us that we already have all the demand signal. So we put into this product a module that harnesses that grassroots work. Let us first allow people to do everything they want. Now let's look at what they're doing. And if we see two types of things, right? If we see repeated patterns, people are trying to build the same thing, marketing is trying to build content, etc. We see risk,
Hmm.
right? You really don't want to do this on the public. And we see resource connectivity. People are finding things that are company resources, pulling them in. That is your signal for an agentic workflow. Risk notwithstanding, risk only because, if you pull the use case in house, now you don't have risk, right? So we realize that even with as few as 50 people in your company, you have enough of these patterns. And so we started surfacing these patterns in a module that's called Idea Labs in our product. And you will not believe the success we have had with harnessing this grassroots power. We are I guess, nudging forward investments in SaaS-based AI tools. We are nudging forward agent development, application development, new products, things like that. It's a really nice example of how the power of grassroots is turning into value. And to complete the loop, we'll also do like a KPI-based productivity analysis. So you can build this thing and you can say, what are the KPIs you want impacted? This thing is supposed to improve my customer retention rate, or this thing is supposed to, improve my time to shipping product, or whatever it is that you do. And it will track and measure adoption, and it will track and measure the impact on those KPIs.
Mhm.
Now you can have a CFO look at it. So the impact is real, and nothing is better suited to this type of end-to-end life cycle, impact of grassroots than something that's fully in the technology realm like AI.
Mhm.
So again, right, you're asking us short questions. We're giving you long answers. Hopefully,
Love it.
the vibe is matching what you're hoping for.
Well, and I can add, like we just came from RSAC, which for your viewers and listeners is the largest security conference hosted in San Francisco every year. And we had the good fortune of talking to 100 plus CISOs there. And what's a CISO? Chief Information Security Officer. So they kind of manage the cybersecurity and the risk in an organization. And typically, these people only get recognized. I never get recognized. They only get called out when something goes wrong.
Mhm.
Nobody at the end of the day says, "Hey, nothing bad happened today." Meanwhile, they're under relentless attack over and over and over again. And security is their purview. But we heard from them over and over again is that they have become the doctor no in the organization
Mhm.
to AI adoption because and the reason why is because they don't know what to invest in. They don't know what to allow in. And over, we heard from CISOs this same refrain of, how do I become the business enabler for the organization? How do I open up the doors and yet put my arms around risk? And so when you start talking about where's the success stories, we literally have CISOs coming up to us as like, thank you for this, because now instead of being the blocker in the organization, we're actually contributing towards the business objectives of the board and the C-suite, which is going like, hurry up and do this now, get this done. And the CISO is going like, hold on a minute,
Mhm.
like you can't go that fast, right? So
Yeah.
we're matching this yin and yang of defense, like securing it, but going on the offense of and that's been a big change. Like this has taken about 2 or 3 years for this kind of concept to kind of take root. And I
Yeah.
think it's going to change the way CISOs are perceived in the organization. Knock on wood for them because they've got a tough job.
Mhm.
I'd like two specific examples to answer your really particular question on grassroots success. So we had one customer who has a, large workforce where the HR department cares about taking the people along, right? Because obviously the technology is changing, but how to take the people along. And they had an initiative which came up literally grassroots called AI University. And they were taking what was on our platform, right? And we are giving you visibility, obviously, with the right entitlements into who's doing what and how they're doing it. And they use that to create this AI University, which is basically like a closed loop training program. And it had a huge impact, is having a huge impact because where people, had all of these fears and concerns about using AI, how to use AI, what happens to my job, etc. This initiative really turned into something that none of us expected. Like we didn't expect like an HR to take something like that and run with it, but they did, which is fantastic, really, really good. And then in another company, again, unexpected grassroots benefit, we had like a head of engineering. So again, right, typically we sit within cyber and we do our job with this, but you have a head of engineering that's trying to make a decision on what AI assisted software development tools to invest in, right? Like, am I buying a GitHub Copilot license? Am I buying Claude Code? Like, what am I doing? And having the visibility into the grassroots usage, who's using it, where they're using it, who's producing more code, what circumstances, what teams, it really laid the groundwork for the investment strategy. And then, of course, we've got the license management functionality, but very much bottoms up. So having the ability and the instrumentation to actually do bottoms up and get bottoms up data has
Hmm.
really changed how they steer it and how much they get out of it. And so, I mean, those are really specific things that we're pretty proud of.
Yeah, no, I love that. And how do you approach these conversations with leaders within organizations around you know, prioritizing governance and prioritizing visibility into usage over just jumping straight into tooling.
Yeah, so I think we have learned to listen really carefully on where the mandate is coming from. And we have the benefit of having a lot of breadth, right? So when we open a door and we have
Mhm.
a customer conversation, I would say there are three types of customers, broadly speaking. There are people who don't know up from down. They're like, I have to do this AI thing, right? Where do I start?
Yeah.
So for them, we have a very prescriptive 1, 2, 3. Start with shadow AI, turn the lights on, see what's happening. You'll get a sense of what adoption is in your organization. And then, we really think you should manage your risk. And then maybe you can get to measuring impact, something like that, right? So that's an easy one. And no matter who you are, you can typically benefit from that. But doors 2 and 3 get interesting. So door 2 is a very security focused thing. This is like a mid to large company, and they know by now, right? There's a lot of marketing dollars going into securing AI. They know they have to secure AI. So for them, it's about like, what's your goal? Is it a data loss focused, data IP, privacy loss focused organization, or are we doing incident management? Are we doing insider threat analysis, with respect to generative AI? Those all fall in the security domain. And then we're basically mapping functionality into that. The third, though, most interesting of all, this is where the mandate is adoption, the mandate is ROI, impact, competitive advantage, right? We know our competitors are using it, we want to use it better. Those are really interesting because there we work backwards. So we say, okay, you are, and this is a very common example, you have paid this SI partner of yours, I don't know, $25 million to do a business transformation, AI powered business transformation over the next 2 years. You need to find your high value AI use cases. You need to make sure you adopt it responsibly and all of the security challenges aren't there. Those are really, really interesting because usage is, mandating usage is already there coming down from the top. Now we have to basically map in all of what people are already using and then make sure it's secure and map the top down use case to the bottom up use case. And then it's more involved, but it's also more complete, and
Mhm.
they're already bought into the types of things that we do. So it's roughly in those categories. There's always like the assessment, like you could go in and you could say, okay, if you're not ready and you just want to know how things are going, let's just come in, turn the lights on for 2 weeks and do an assessment. So that's kind of the motions that we have, assuming that was your question, like how are these conversations happening and how do we make the connections inside.
One of the things we've learned, Nick, over time, like everybody who comes to us, even though we have these 1, 2, 3, and some people are just going like, I have to do this, right? From the top down, from the board and the C-suite, they didn't say adopt AI to open up a new threat surface.
No.
So none of this is being done to create like companies like Portal26 or other cybersecurity companies to protect something. They all want to extract value out of it. And I think one of the things that's been interesting in talking to people more lately is what I was mentioning before, is that more people are now going like, okay, I've got it locked down or I've got it secure or I'm blocking, but I don't know what to do next or I don't know where the value is. And so I think one of the things that we've kind of learned over time is that you have to bridge that gap between, something you have to do, create a secure environment so that you're confident to enable, but also extracting the full value out of why you're doing this in the first place.
Hmm.
And we believe, at least at this point in time, that's unique to us. I'm sure our competition will eventually copy us as they always do. But and Artie's laughing at that
Laughing Hardy.
It's fine.
No,
It's
why?
fine.
You had a story there.
Oh, well, we have found um companies that were formed as recently as like mid last year that look like they have taken Neil's blogs and put them into Chat GPT and just kind of regurgitated things. We laugh because we find, we track these terms, and it happens a lot, but I think, imitation is a form of flattery, so we're not, it's fine, it's good. But this is Neil's world. We laugh because it's Neil's world. We're sending each other saying, hey Neil, we found your latest term, because he's making up these terms, right? He's like coining the phrase and everything, and then it's popping up in other places. So this is
Yeah, it's
it's
Yeah.
a
probably just
function of our
AI.
times.
They're probably
What's
using
that?
AI to write them, and the AI is
Oh, yeah.
eating your website where everything lives, and it's just regurgitating it back
Exactly.
out, right?
Well, but that's the world.
Exactly.
That's how fast everything's work. And we were talking about this before we came on, Nick. The speed, the pace of change is nearly impossible to keep up with. I was talking with my wife earlier today about Pakshi, who's our co-founder. He's our chief product officer and chief Gen AI officer. And I was just talking about the stress and like on keeping up with, or staying ahead because we're trying to, the old Gretzky quote, go to where the puck's going. Like we're
Mhm.
building this stuff and saying like, what's going to be next? What are people going to need to have listening to our customers? But to keep up with that pace and build robust products that are going to do the work, I just can't even imagine what it's like. Because, like I told you, I've been on the internet since 1997 and things move fast in my first startups.
Mhm.
I have never seen like week to week, we're going like, what does this mean? Like actually
Yeah.
like existentially, what does it mean? Not like, oh, it's just a little tweak here
Mhm.
and it's a little tweak there. It's like, oh no, things have fundamentally changed. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, what
Yeah.
do you think it means to every security company in the world that this mythos is out?
Yeah.
Like, they must be rethinking their entire freaking business models right now because
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
they're
it's a
terrified, I'm sure.
whole different ball game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and the stock market doesn't help, right? Because you just get these wild fluctuations. Remember, Neil, going back to the story, remember, Neil, one company, without naming names, one company managed to copy our certifications, and you can't just like say you're certified if you're not, right? And
Right.
that doesn't work.
Mhm.
So, so we then noticed that they were like very fine print saying coming soon under the certification, but the SEO and the answer engine optimization picks that up. So
Mhm.
that one really made us laugh. We're like, yeah, it took us 2 years to get the certification. You've not even
Mhm.
been around 2 years. So
Right.
that's
Uh,
Anything to
just
add, Neil?
Pardon me?
Said anything to add to that?
Oh, me? No, it's just part of the day, I mean, you could do a whole episode on what's changed for marketers because it's crazy. But it's still at the end of the day, it's do you have the right story? In Silicon Valley, there's an old mantra that it's not the best product and technology that wins, it's the best story.
yeah,
And we're battling that every day now. But that I don't know if that's important to your listeners in just saying that the pace of change is so fast, and what the customers are thinking about. Like one day, our CISOs were worried about what the users were doing, and in one week that all changed to agents, and that's all they can talk about. Meanwhile, maybe 5 to 10% of these companies have agents in them.
Mm-hmm.
So, the reality versus the hype and where their worry and their, is
yeah,
is like there's this huge gap. Yet that's where the conversation has gone. So where's your agentic protections and what's your program for that and all that kind of stuff where,
yeah,
a week before nobody was talking about it. Just think of Clawbot. I mean, it was crazy what happened. And
yeah,
Artie and I were on a conversation over the weekend. I go like, did you see this? This is insane. Like we're going back and forth like in real time, laughing and panicking, and then laughing again, and then like
Mm-hmm.
what
yeah,
does this mean? And like trying to
yeah,
figure it out because it just all of a sudden everything changed, and then 3 weeks later you have Jensen Huang standing in front of a billion people telling him like Clawbot's my new standard, and
Mm-hmm.
this thing didn't exist a month and a half ago.
Right.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think generally speaking, I must say we are grateful for where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Permission from our customers to basically observe everything that's happening, right? And so that is a really good place to be, because while it's work to analyze the data a different way or recognize new signals on the network, the fact that you're on the network and you are observing everything and you've got permission to kind of take it apart and
Mm-hmm.
and work your magic, I think that's really special.
Yeah.
And so we we owe it to these people to do a good job, to stay on top of all of the changes so that that investment and partnership that they make, and many of them are signing long-term multi-year partnerships with us. So we feel privileged to have that opportunity.
Absolutely. And do you guys think we're heading towards a future where every single company needs like an AI control security layer as part of their stack?
Oh, for sure. We think it would be irresponsible to not have it. In fact, I think, and insurance companies move really, really slow, but I think at some point, if you're gonna, want AI insurance or cyber insurance, et cetera, you're gonna have to demonstrate that you actually have eyes on it, right?
Mhm.
And so I think we're moving to that world. What it looks like remains to be seen. Like at the moment, we're stitching together different capabilities, but I imagine at some point, right, there might be some more structure or some standardization or something, right, that makes it easier for enterprises to wrap their arms around it.
Mhm.
Right. And there's this whole notion, and everybody's heard it, because everybody goes to the worst case scenario of Skynet, but you don't want to have a fully autonomous cybersecurity operation and a fully autonomous, let's say, marketing or business organization. Everybody's saying it was like, oh, I'm going to, do the AI CEO and all this
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And
No.
this is, and you've heard the trope of the where's the human in the loop, but there's some balance will soon appear where it's the Goldilocks of the right amount of AI, the right amount of human, the right amount of autonomy. We haven't found that balance yet. Nobody knows what that balance is, right?
Mhm.
Um, and actually going back to my conversation with Pachi over this, like we were talking about vibe coding one day, and he showed me we'd made up a little app real quick, and then but it got philosophical fairly quick. He said because yeah, I'm able to do this right now because I have, 25, 30 years as an engineer and building product and understanding all this kind of stuff. But 10 years from now, if you get rid of all your engineers and AI does all the coding, who's going to be me? Who's going to be the supervisor? Who's going to be the person who understands whether this thing is doing the things it needs to do in the way that it needs to be done? There has to be a certain level of expertise or control over this that's a human element, that's not a bot. You can't train the bot to do that. And I think the mistake that everybody's saying, to your point about jobs and losses and all that kind of stuff, I think it's all overblown because you're still going to need people to shape this. And so it's going to be new jobs that shape this new world. They're going to be a little different than they look right now. They might be the same kind of coders or engineers we have right now, but we're going to figure out the right way to do it. And I think that's what's going on right now. You got this great push and pull between what's the right way to do it. And it's fascinating to watch in real time. I mean, you've got people who and like not to like again personal opinion here, not the company opinion, where you have Dorsey's company saying I'm laying everybody off because we're going to be this AI, but really covering up what I think is overhiring and
Mhm.
a bloated company, and just passing it off onto something else. Whereas you have other companies who are creating entire departments to figure out new products, new directions, new profit streams. They're not laying people off, they're bringing people in to master this technology and create new revenue streams. That to
Mhm.
me seems a smarter way to go, even though you're going to have some of this corporate bloat go, and you're going to have a lot of people blaming it on AI, but it's not AI. It's
Mhm.
just it's just maybe they overhired during the pandemic.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and we've seen a lot of that, right? Where, frankly, they did overhire. A lot of companies did, but also headcount used to be the measure of success of the company, right? It was
Yeah.
how many people do you have? Is 110,000 better than 105,000? But is it just like, you're just going for high score type thing, right? It's like everybody just wants the most people working for them. And I mean, it's really interesting to kind of see how all of that is happening and how it's going to continue to happen. I'm with you from an autonomous perspective, right? Like that worries me as both of I'm sure you guys both heard that Anthropic was in March labeled a supply chain risk by the government because they would not allow their agents to be used for fully autonomous weapons and for
Right.
mass surveillance, right? But like we know there are other people that are happy to do that, but I don't know. Knowing everything you guys know about agents and LLMs out there and their risk of hallucination. What are your thoughts on having autonomous weapon systems that are running on LLMs or agents? And if you
No,
want
I
to
think
pass,
it's
that's
really.
fine. If that's too hot, much of a hot button.
Oh, no, I mean, look, it's hard to have any other position than acknowledging that it's risky,
Hmm.
and the consequences of hallucinations and errors are really strong and
Hmm.
grave. And so hopefully there are parallel technologies. Like I was saying, you really have to have that governance path, but hopefully there are technologies and efforts on discrete guardrails as opposed to probabilistic, right? Our AI world is basically a probabilistic world, as you don't want to
Hmm.
get too geeky here, right? But
Please,
sometimes what's that?
please go ahead.
Yeah, but just simply stated, AI is a probability technology. It's about the best likelihood of the next part of the recommendation of the sentence or the content that's being created.
Hmm.
But in high stakes worlds such as defense and military and weapons and things like that, you need discrete, not probable. You need deterministic, not discrete. The word I was looking for was deterministic. You need deterministic guardrails, right? You need the line is bright and it's black and white. So I think enough work needs to be done to develop the deterministic guardrails if we're going to do anything, which then again, it kind of tempers the autonomy. Um, but for sure, you need very strong development on that side to pull it off. Otherwise, human in the loop is the way. And I'm
Hmm.
the daughter of a fighter pilot, so this is very close to home.
Hmm.
Without having the human oversight or error correction or fail safe and things like that, it has never been deemed safe in the military anyway. So we'll see
Right.
where this
Yeah,
goes.
well, and Nick, for your listeners and viewers, like deterministic, I'll give you an example of the difference between the two. Waymo and the cars, right? Like all the autonomous cars. When
Hmm.
you leave your home every morning, do you follow a walk plan? Do you file a walk plan? When you drive your car, do you file a drive plan?
Hmm.
Nobody does, and you don't know what's going to happen out there. Like a bazillion different, like probabilities every single day. That's a different kind of AI, right? That has to figure out a lot of stuff. In
Hmm.
autonomous flight, right? Which, by the way, almost all flight right now is autonomous, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's deterministic.
Hmm.
That's all preset. Everything that happens in an airplane, or you hear about the air taxis, the autonomous taxis like Whisk, Arrow, and that type of a thing, is deterministic. It's all
Hmm.
predetermined. Everything, nothing can happen that isn't already factored in, right? And so that plane will always go from A to B with no fail because it's
Hmm.
determined, but it's still autonomous, right? So that's
Hmm.
the difference between the two. And they're both very complicated in their own way, but
Hmm.
one's a lot harder than the other, right? That's
Hmm.
why, right? And that's why Waymos and the others sometimes curl up in the fetal position in an intersection because they just can't handle it all. It's overload and they don't know what to do. And
Yep.
that can't happen with deterministic.
Yeah. I mean, as we talk about some of these other use cases, right? As well as yeah, the governance and security. What do you think some of the worst case scenarios are if companies or governments are going to continue to like adopt AI without proper visibility and controls into what you're using, what people are using it for, and how it's being used?
Right.
So I think there's two types of worst case scenario. There's the business and then there's the security, right?
Mhm.
So starting with the business, which is the whole reason why people are adopting, hopefully. Without visibility, you're unlikely to meet your business goals. And that unlikely, I should say, strongly, highly. If you don't have visibility, it basically means you don't know what you're doing. You're a chef without a recipe. You're like a, CEO without data. You just the chances that you're going to meet your high ROI business outcomes and deploy AI in a transformative way without having visibility and instrumentation into what's happening, whether it's happening and how it's being executed, are like slim to none. So
Hmm.
I feel like that's a consequence. And if you're doing it for no other reason, do it to serve your business purpose. Make sure you know what's happening and why it's happening. Um, on the security side, the consequences are grave and horrible, right? Because losing data, right, who's losing data to who, depending on what the data is and who's on either side of that loss, it could be really serious, national security. It could be, not so serious to the country, but pretty bad for you, identity, right? Personal safety.
Hmm.
Um, and it'd be everything in between, creepy, right? So we think that, I mean, I think about my parents, senior citizens, right? If they are not educated on researching medication
Hmm.
on
Yeah.
Google with and without Gemini, right? Like one is reasonably safe. I can look up, whether I should have Advil in combination with Tylenol or not and kind of get the right answer. May or may not be true if you use AI, right? And then, so the consequences are pretty dramatic. I'm hopeful as capitalistic society grow that the business outcomes and wanting to
Hmm.
meet your business outcomes actually is the forcing function that drives people to make sure that there's visibility.
100%. Anything to add, Neil?
Oh, no, that was beautifully said. I agree.
Absolutely. No, how do you think that speaking specifically around legal in the legal world, how do you see their, those organizations, whether it's internal like legal departments within companies or law firms, how do you see their requirements differing from, other folks that are, let's just say in less regulated industries?
Um, I'll give a version of the answer. I'm sure Neil has his. I
Yeah.
think that for the people that the world relies on for compliance and legality and getting it right, it the importance of them getting it right cannot be overstated, right?
Mhm.
Like you just have to ensure. Unfortunately, that's not been the case over the last 2 years. We have read, news stories of legal personnel that have used AI and filed briefings in cases with false information completely fabricated by AI. That's a problem. We also know that legal demands a pretty high rate for services. There's always a question and an expectation of accuracy. So legal personnel, using AI, it really should be governed.
Hmm.
Um, that is also not the case right now. The politics of a law firm interferes with the governance of AI. And I've said it, it's been said now. So I don't know if
Yeah.
I'm going to make people angry or not. But basically, the politics of a law firm has the partners that who typically aren't technologists driving, the CIO, the CISO, and IT. And I think that thing needs to solve itself really fast.
Yeah.
It's not the case today.
Yeah.
Neil, you want to add
Well, no,
anything
you
to
hit the
that?
nail on the head, and especially being at Legal Tech Week, the challenges that we heard come on a couple of different sides. First, everybody, if anybody's watched a legal procedural, they know that all the associates and interns and everybody works 400-hour weeks and
Mhm.
is digging, 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 and there's a reality in that, right? Especially if you're trying to make that partner track, and so finding ways to increase your workload and amplify yourself is very common, and that amplification sometimes comes with risks. And you're doing that in an environment that's a highly rules-based environment, like everything is set on precedent and what's come before it and previous rulings and citing cases. And so we've all heard like citing cases that didn't exist because it makes it up because AI wants to please. So what the biggest things are trust and confidence that come out of all this legal research and e-discovery. But there's also this new thing emerging that your prompts now can be used in discovery, like what was a company doing and how did they use that and all that kind of stuff. So is that being stored and can you discover that? And can you audit and do the forensics to prove that
Mhm.
you're doing all the right things? And yet that audit trail has yet to exist unless you do logs and throw a bunch of bodies at it and
Yeah,
that kind
but
of a thing. Yeah.
I actually see there needs to be some work to balance, disclosure and retention with auditability because you I have been in meetings where, the company has been ready to proceed because they want the visibility for security and business, and legal has said, oh no, if we
Yeah,
retain it, we'll have to disclose it, right? And they have
right,
killed the project. And this happened more than once.
right.
And we've looked at that and said, wow, okay, I guess it's only 2024. We have to give this as like 2024 stories. They have to give
Mhm.
it a couple more years before this is like not okay. But I don't think we've crossed that over to that point yet. I think there is still a conflict between retention, disclosure, risk of disclosure,
Mhm.
Right.
not having audit, and they're like working
Well, and,
at cross
that's
purposes.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have had people, but there have been some precedents handed down around prompts, and we'll see
Yeah.
where that
Yeah.
goes when
Yeah.
they get challenged because they're getting challenged
Yeah.
in court.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
on the other side, and Artie, you leaned into this when you said the cost. So clients now know that AI is available.
Mhm.
And so you're charging me hourly for your work. It should take less hours to do this. So they want to see a break on their bill.
Mhm.
And we
Yeah.
heard this from some of the people when we were at Legal Tech is like, we're getting pressure from our clients to
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
justify the amount of hours that we put into any particular case. And they know that if we use some of these tools, we can compress that by 20, 30, 40%.
Mhm.
So what are you
Yeah.
doing about it and what tools are you using? So when you combine that pressure to be more efficient from a cost perspective and the pressure of all the associates and everybody doing all the research to find any shortcut to amplify themselves,
Mhm.
it creates an environment where there's going to be more demand for these tools. And
Yeah.
that's what, and at least some of the stuff that we heard when we were there on the floor.
Well, the funny thing is, at least in early 2025, which is where my next example is from, certain mid to large law firms were charging about between 100 and $250,000 to craft AI policy for the
Mhm.
mid to large enterprise, right? So now but it was all geared towards humans saying you shall not do this and you shall not do that, right? Things like that. And I think that world is changing because when you have no ability to enforce the rules at all,
Mhm.
um, the nature of the rules needs to change, right? And then
Correct.
of course look in the mirror. So I think a lot of that needs
100%.
to change. Yeah.
No, 100%. And I think it's really interesting to kind of see how this market is coping with the change and the speed at which everything's changing, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing is that there's always been change, but the pace of change has increased and it's going to continue to increase, I think, as we continue to move forward. And I'm not really sure that anybody's really ready, whether this is
Yeah.
organizationally, like at a government level, in organizations, small, medium, and large, for how fast things are going to change and how fast like the nature of society itself could change. Um, and how work is going to get done. Do you think that there are organizations that are truly prepared for how fast everything is going to be reshaped?
Yeah.
And what do you think, which do you think there are ones that are closer to being ready, and what kind of what are what is the differentiator between those that are really, really not ready and those that are like maybe a little bit ready?
You know, what is really unique about this change is that what is happening to businesses and enterprises as entities is moving at a completely different pace than what's happening to people and how they're using.
Mhm.
And the enterprises are made of the people. So
Mhm.
you've got this like dichotomy, right? How it's developing. And I would say the enterprise path is like too slow for what is needed because the true pace of adoption is being driven by the people that are adopting it, but
Mhm.
the governance and the preparedness is being driven by at a corporate level, and they are like orders of magnitude moving at a different pace. So the best of organizations is woefully ill prepared from what we can see.
Mhm.
And then the question is like, who's writing the report card? Like, who is measuring whether you're ready or not? If you're doing real world consequences, right, like events, incidents, success, etc., we're far from even having a framework for measuring that. Like, who knows who's being successful, who's, and we won't know until something really crashes and burns or someone really comes out ahead, and we're just like not there. In the meantime, the report card is being written by people that are, writing them for whatever reason that historically did McKinsey, but like there are people that are saying, oh, well, this business is really ahead and they've done this transformation and let's write a case study or whatever. And that I feel is a little skewed towards enterprise programs, right? So that is skewed towards, oh, well, look, we applied AI to the supply chain for this large agricultural enterprise and we did things faster and, we whatever, save these costs or whatever that is, right? So you see where I'm going? Like it's a non-answer answer, but I feel like we don't know. Those that are saying they're ready are ready in very specific ways for initiatives that are being reported on, so to say. But otherwise, from where we sit and the metrics that come up through our system, there's not a day that goes by where we're not like, wow, some executive at some customer feels like a huge light bulb just went off. And
Hmm.
so anyway, so I mean, it's a bit of a non-answer. Neil is really good at taking my ramblings and turning them into precise sound bites. Neil, how would you say it?
Well, first on the value gap between what people are doing and what the enterprise is doing, people think I've cut my time in half, right? They'll
Yeah,
tell you what the value is immediately, like, oh, I did that
yeah.
job in half the time. So that's a no-brainer, and that's happening. Now, whether the stuff's any good is another question, but they believe it, and that's what's important, right? They think they're getting the value out of it. Where I think a lot of the changes happening is at the departmental level, and I'll use marketing as an example. I'm friends with an organization called Traction. They have something called the Future Proof Project, and they bring together CMOs from some of the top brands in the world. If I named the 350, 400 CMOs that are in this network, and they get together and they talk about this, and they all already know that their lives have changed because they're getting pressure from the CEO that says, "Oh, you've got AI now. You don't need a 50-person department. You need a 15-person." Their expectation from the C-suite is that you're going to cut people and be as productive. And so I can take that money to the bottom line. They're looking at it completely differently. When I've been to a couple of these future-proof meetings, and they're looking at it and they're going like, wow, look at all the different things I can do. I can find new markets. I can market better to this ideal customer profile. I can find new ways in. I can do this. I can do that. Stuff I couldn't do before. So they're looking at it as like a force multiplier and an amplifier, and
Hmm.
they're even rewriting their how they do business. Like I know one company that actually did an engagement with one agency to reimagine their marketing department in the next year using AI. What tools should they use? For
Hmm.
what should they
Yeah.
use it? Like doing a full analysis, and then what should be the JDs, the job
Right.
descriptions for all of those things. So
Hmm.
at the department level, I think there's a
Yeah.
high level of motivation because they're getting the CMO or the head of engineering is getting this extreme pressure from the C-suite. So they're not necessarily enterprise-wide programs as opposed to department-specific programs, but
Hmm.
yet back to the point, they're invisible. They don't know what's going on. They have no way to measure
Well,
success or the metrics once they start doing these programs.
Hmm.
well, I was going to say, let's use ourselves as an example. So this is, live exercise here on the show. I would say that, so my co-founders, one runs product management, the other runs engineering, right? So there's the three of us.
Hmm.
Um, our job as a startup is to make our dollars, every dollar that we earn, we want it to last forever, right? So engineering for us was the first to transform. And I would say that relative to 2 years ago, we are at least at 3x the capacity for the same number of engineers. Now we've grown engineering as well, but proportionally so.
Yeah, of
So
course.
I would say 3x outcome. So hugely successful. We're a small company and it's all visible and we're supporting. Product management for us was a second tier. So product for the last year, engineering, since the beginning, has been doing some product management increasingly. So now instead of hiring a new product manager, another new product manager, last night my head of PM and co-founder were talking, and he was like, you know what? I think I don't want a new headcount. But what I want to do is redirect that spend to token because I am producing so much more faster. And like, the PM overhead per engineer for us has gone down
Hmm.
because of AI. Like we're
Right.
able to conceive the features, mock the features, test
Hmm.
the features, run them through customers. So on the ground at that level, to Neil's point, we see a ton of success.
Hmm.
Right? It's
Yeah.
pretty magical, and I love it. I don't have to spend more, and I get more product faster, and we're more
Absolutely.
competitive. And
No, and I see the same thing with not just, folks in your line of business, whether it's the technology space, but people across the board, right, I see that, yeah, you could reduce the number of people in your organization and have the same level of productivity. But what I prefer to do is look at increased productivity, right? So, yeah, I have the same number of people, but by empowering them with the right tools, they get so much more, so you get so much more productivity out of them. And, so your organizational capacity increases, like a lot very, very quickly. And so, it's without additional spend. So that's an excellent point, Artie. I really love it. But,
Well, and
I think,
this is like inserting a commercial message. One of the things, and it looks like we lost Artie, but one of the things,
hmm
that, we quickly did was to enable in our tool,
hmm
departmental level visibility for
right.
that department head without looking at the other department. So it's like, we're going to let you look at your category and what people are doing and get that visibility. And then you can manage your KPIs from the bottom up versus, the company CEO said, we bought Microsoft Copilot or we bought Anthropic or whatever that macro tool is and make it work. Right.
hmm
Versus like in marketing, it's very, very specific. If you're doing marketing automation or account-based marketing, or maybe you use a tool like Canva. Maybe you have other AI data sources of companies that are out there that are doing it, like Blue Ocean, which is an agentic platform for
hmm
brands. These are the kind of tools that you might want to be using specifically that are a lot different than what the top down might be. And so that's where you're going to kind of see that change, right?
hmm
That happen. But you have to give the department people that power, that the tools to be able to see and manage. Because if you're the CEO and you say like, CMO, CTO, or whoever you are, here's the KPIs I want you to live to. Well, give them the tools they need to manage to those KPIs. And
hmm
right now, nobody has those. And so I was doing a commercial message that we at least enable
Yeah.
that.
now that's awesome.
No,
Sorry,
100%.
lost internet.
Yeah,
Back
it
now.
happens. It happens. But I love your point about getting more productivity from the same number of resources. It's fantastic. But as we get ready to wrap up, is there anything that we missed or you'd like to discuss or bring up or talk about that I forgot to ask because I was deficient in some way.
I'll go
Oh,
first, and
you're
then
not deficient.
yeah, I'll go
Go ahead.
first, and I'll let Arti finish. First of all, in the startup world, I always have a saying when I coach and advise people: things aren't as good as you think they are, and things aren't as bad as they think they are. So, if you kind of just like look at the world and what's going on and all the hype, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of angst. There's a lot of people who are worried about their jobs and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't be concerned or shouldn't be paying attention, but just like every change in history of technology, like going back to the printing press, and people would go like, "Are you kidding?" But like the printing press, this is a Gutenberg moment, just like the Industrial Revolution, and just like I'm old enough to remember when they put a laptop on my desk, and like a million people lost their jobs because they were doing word processing and typing. But it also created the IT department and cybersecurity and like trillions of dollars of economic, productivity. So, and people had to relearn. Like not everybody used to know how to type. Nobody
Mhm.
knows that, right?
Right.
Right? So
Well,
so people like fundamentally, this is one of those moments in history where things will fundamentally change, and people are just having trouble wrapping around the pace. What I would tell people is don't fear it. Just educate and embrace it, and go at your pace. But if you if you block it out, you will miss on it. And I'm talking about people who are 20 years old, and I'm talking about people who are 50 or 60 years old, or in my case, even older.
Hmm.
Like you got to wrap your arms around this thing because it's how stuff's going to get done. And it's not going to be whether it differentiates you in the marketplace, it's going to be the minimum standard. So, like whether you think it's a trend or not, it's not, it's a fait accompli, it's happening. Get your arms around it. So that would be what I would say to end it. I don't know where you want to go with this, Artie, but that's my message to
Well,
your listeners.
similar, I was going to say, I think as a founder, because you have us on this on your show talking about our company and our perspective, having this organization of ours. I think as a founder, I would say AI has become the grand equalizer. Like I used to joke when we're a pandemic company, right? We did a lot of our early days during COVID. And at that time, I used to say Zoom is the great equalizer. You would never know that we're a startup company back in 2022, 2019, 2021. Now I feel like in a much more grand scale, AI has created these opportunities and this incredible, opportunity for personal growth, professional growth, world-changing things. So in that way, I think it's a real gift to be, alive at this time and to be an entrepreneur at this time and to have our friends together in our company solving these problems. Uh, so it's a really positive thing, I think. And, today here we are selling governance and security, maybe at another time we'll be doing other AI related things. But I really do see it as a net positive. I feel it is just incredible to
Hmm.
witness this, what is happening in the world.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. No, really, really,
Mhm.
really is. And it'll be really interesting to see how we navigate this over the next 5 to 10 years. And I know that you guys are going to be instrumental in helping with a lot of that as you are able to help give people visibility into how these tools are being used within organizations. So really appreciate it. Love everything you're doing. And Artie, thank you so much for coming on today. I really had a great time.
Thank you. We feel the same way. Every time in history that there's been change, the media and communication has never been more significant. So, the time you take out of your day to put the show together and to, share ideas, etc., it's pretty fundamental
Mhm.
to what's happening. So thank you for doing your part.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. And by the way, it's not 5 to 6 years. I think it's 5 weeks.
5 minutes, it's tomorrow. While we've been on the show, who knows what Anthropic did, right?
Yeah, I got to check my
Literally.
feed. Yeah.
There you go. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate
Thank
it
you.
again. And everybody out there, thank you so much for listening to Robots of Red Tape. As always, Nick Schutt here signing off and hope you're having a great day.